I'm going to talk briefly about the SCA snap and the foil flick. In the Society for Creative Anachronism, also known as the SCA, their main type of fighting is heavy fighting, that is, sword and shield. The sword is a rattan stick over an inch in diameter, wrapped in duct tape, and the shield is a heater shield, triangular large shield held in the offhand. It is perhaps the most natural type of weapon fighting. Even though in the SCA they allow thrusts, most of the blows are swings, which I will call strikes. And even though they value power, it turns out that the prime technique for delivering the strikes in the SCA is the snap. We instinctively know that the stronger blow is usually a clubbing blow. Think of the Muay Thai roundhouse kick, which is a follow-through, versus the karate roundhouse snap kick, in which you pull back. The clubbing blow generates more power, but the snapping blow develops or delivers a surprising amount of power with good technique. What I mean by the snap swing is that, like in throwing a baseball, you get your large muscle groups moving first, and you end with your small muscle groups moving last. You start the hip moving, so the blow starts from your hip, and the last thing is the whip of your arm, and finally the hand. And the big advantage of the snap blow is that you can change it at the last moment to take advantage of an opening or emerging target. This reminds me a lot of the flick in modern Olympic foil fencing. Foil fencing evolved from the European smallsword, which was a relatively stiff, sharp blade that was thrusting only. Think of it as a spike. But when it evolved into the foil, the tip was blunted and the blade was made very flexible, so thanks to modern steel technology. And in the 1950s, the tip was electrified, which means that a button was put on the end so that you had to press the button, ostensibly with a thrust, to set off the light and the buzzer. You can get around this somewhat by the great flexibility of the blade. If you do a whipping action, you can still whip your foil around an attempted block, but the whip action at the end will still allow the foil tip to land on the button. So according to the electric machine, you've made a thrust, but you've kind of cheated. How can you get around this? Well, you can't make the blade stiffer. So foil has evolved and changed to a very great extent. Modern foil fencing that uses absence of blade and bent arm attack and the flick bears little resemblance to the original small sword, which was thrusting with a rigid blade, or a relatively rigid blade, for maximum penetration. By contrast, medieval sword and shield fighting, there's not as much difference between a clubbing swing and a snap swing. There is a difference, but it's not as great a difference as that between small sword and foil. So foil has changed more. If you're a modern foil fencer and haven't tried SCA heavy fighting, you might be surprised at how similar they are and how easy or natural a transition it is for you. You won't be able to do as much of a flick because the rattan stick sword is quite rigid, but the concept is the same. And by the same token, if you are a SCA heavy fighter and you haven't tried modern Olympic foil fencing, you might give it a try. Doing the flick in modern foil fencing is similar to the snap hit in SCA fighting, except much more so, because your weapon is much more flexible.